thanks to Palgrave Communications and to the wider Springer Nature family for hosting this discussion, which marks the emergence of this thematic collection. One of the nice things of doing stuff through a journal like Palgrave Communications is that special issues don't have a beginning, middle and end and a cover and a date. They can sort of evolve progressively over time. And so we thought it would be good to have this event to mark the start of the process, the publication of the first few papers, but also to signal our intent for this collection to make an ongoing contribution to these debates in the UK and internationally over the next year and beyond. Our motivation in having a collection on this theme was firstly that 2016 marked 30 years since the introduction of national research assessment in the UK. The first, well, it wasn't even called the RAE back then. I had a nice slide that showed you the evolution of the assessment system, which you'll have to now imagine, through its successive iterations from 1986 to the present day. So that was partly the motivation. We felt it was 30 years was a good enough reason to take stock and to reflect a bit more deeply, to reflect comparatively, which is part of the focus of this evening, on how our system has developed relative to other attempts to do something similar. And the second sort of immediate trigger in a UK-specific context was the process of evaluation of REF 2014 that had taken place over the period of 2014-2015, and indeed to which I and other panellists had contributed in various ways, which was focusing then on the debate over the form and shape of the next REF. The Stern review, Nick Stern's review of the future of the exercise, was published in the summer of this year, at the end of July.
But for me, if you look at peer review as a group process, it's not about whether we supplement it or complement it with indicators or not. It is about how do we get these groups of evaluators to work smarter? How do we get them to work better? And that requires you to look at the social interplay of evaluators as indicative of notions of interacting notions of societal impact excellence.
The Stern Review recommendations are in many ways within that framework quite radical, and I think that's going to be the focus of the debate in the UK in the coming months. We expect our consultation to be published any day now. It's been any day now for about a month, but it really is any day now, and I would imagine it'll be out in the early part of next week at the latest. There are some key features of that consultation that I think it's worth just dwelling on and thinking about, and maybe encouraging a bit of discussion and debate on. Lord Stern recommended that all research staff should be submitted rather than the current position where universities select which staff to be submitted. That raises some quite interesting challenges about how you identify all research staff. What does that mean? How do you allocate those staff to disciplinary areas? Is it for universities to continue to do that, or do we need to find some way of automating using data sources that we already have to allocate staff to disciplinary areas? Some really tricky questions in that. There's a strong push within Stern to break the linkage between individuals and their research outputs, and to make the whole exercise more focused on the institution and less on the individual. But within that, a number of challenges. So Stern recommends a variable number of research outputs per researcher, varying between 0 and 6. That has some interesting implications in terms of how many researchers work could represent an entire unit, even in an all-staff submitted scenario. And quite controversially, he also recommended that research output should no longer be portable when researchers move between institutions. Their institutions retain those outputs. And again, there are some interesting policy issues around that. It's a recommendation that was aimed at reducing what is deemed to be excessive researcher mobility around the REF deadline. There are some policy questions about whether it might be too strong a measure and may actually completely restrict researcher movement. And there are also, from my perspective, some major practical challenges in actually how you implement that non-portability.
What I see in the Stern Review is that it's moving towards professional organizational evaluation, which is something else, and which would rather be how the institutions take care of their missions, all of their missions, and their staff, and research quality. So I see a trend towards lifting the evaluation from the individual level, from classical peer review to the organizational evaluation.
The exam question we've been set is this question: is the ref leading or lagging? And the spoiler alert is that I'm going to say at the end that I believe it is technically leading. It's thoughtfully put together, very well considered. The question I want to pose is, where is it leading? And should we be questioning that a little bit more? And I think there's something really interesting embedded in this question, because if we're leading or lagging, that implies, as I think people have alluded to, that there's a single road. There's a single path and a single direction. And that seems a rather problematic concept in our current world for a lot of reasons. So I want to unpack that a little by focusing on this question of excellence.